If you're familiar with wargaming, chances are that you know B-17, Queen of the Skies, a true classical wargaming, one of the most beloved wargames of all time, a solitaire game in which the player controls the crew of a B-17 in World War II, and you go on a series of bombing missions. And this is a game that really has stood the test of time. People still play it regularly. You will see people that make a video about their game sessions, they write after action reports. It's a game that is actually light on the decisions, but it is just so thematically immersive. And if you liked B-17, I think you are gonna love Target for Today, Bombers Over the Reich, 1942-45. This is a game that came out for Legion Wargames, and it is basically an update of B-17. It is based on the same idea, on the same basic concepts, but it's more. There's more of it. You will be very familiar if you play B-17. It is about selecting your crew, selecting your aircraft, rolling on a lot of tables that will lead you to other tables, and we tell you what happens, etc., etc., etc. And that will lead to a very large and immersive range of possible events. That happens as you're reaching the target, then you bomb the target and you try to make it back home. All the same as you see in B-17, but again more. You have more models, you have more places that you're bombing, more places that you start from, and so different types of journeys that you're going to go through, and you'll see how that is resolved. You have more enemies that are going to attack you, a more sophisticated tactical display. It's like B-17 has been the master of solitaire gaming since it came out, and now the master upgraded into the PhD. Mind you, you should not throw away your copy of B-17 because you don't insult grandpa just because the grandson went to school and got a bigger degree. But they're both good games, and Target for Today, if you don't have time to watch my conclusions, can be summarized as like B-17, but more. Now, for more details, I'm gonna show you the game, how it plays, I'm gonna show you the components, and then I'm gonna elaborate a little bit more on the game in my conclusions. If you play the classic B-17 or more recent variations on that idea, such as B-29 Super Fortress, you know this. You know that most of the action is going to be resolved by rolling on different sets of tables. And the game is serious about this. The tables come not in a booklet, but in 3 booklets that specialize in different things. So this game is serious about their tables. At the beginning of a game, you select the campaign that you will want to play, and based on that you will determine the aircraft that is available to you, the time during the war, and also your starting airport. You may start from England in some campaigns or from Italy in other campaigns, giving you a completely different range of targets. Depending on the campaign, different aircrafts will be available to you. You'll select one. Suppose that we decide to play a campaign with the B-17F, then you take the corresponding card and you place it there at the center of the tactical display. You also have then a large mat representing the aircraft that you selected. There is a different one for each model. Again, this is the one for the B-17. You have an area where you place counters representing members of your crew. You'll be very familiar with this idea if you played B-17. And here you have here you have an area that you will use to get a sense of where you are in the general formation. You will roll on a table for each mission, and you will know if you're played, say, of the lead bomber or the middle cell, or just somewhere there in the high cell. And I like the fact that this display here really gives you a sense of how the formation looks like from different angles, from the top, front view, and from the side. And in terms of gameplay, your position in the formation will affect things, several things, especially how often you are likely to be attacked, depending on how easy a target you are, again, depending on where you are in there. So, you're good to go. Now you need to know where you're going to go. So you will determine, after rolling and rolling and rolling on tables, when and where your mission is going to be. I'll skip all the technicalities, just know that for each mission you will be given a target, you will be given a level of escort that will not be the same in all legs of the trip. In some phases you may have poor escort, in other sections fair or good, so it will change throughout the game, throughout the campaign, and also after a lot of rolling you will finally have your target. Once you have your target, you will look at a table such as this one, and as you can see, you will see here on the left the number of the target, and here the number of zones that you have to travel through in order to reach that target. Suppose, I don't know, let's look for a fun one. They're all fun. What's not to love about, you know, blowing stuff up? I don't know. So look at this one, Montpellier, for example. Here we're starting from Italy, and we fly to Montpellier. We know that we had to travel through 12 zones because that is what the table tells us. Oh, actually, no, this is like 13 zones. So we go to the tactical display, we take the primary target counter and we place it there on the display in the zone indicated by that log that you saw. Also, remember, we will determine the number of the bomber that we control. Suppose that we are, say, number 8 in the formation, that we take the corresponding bomber and we place it here. Basically, each turn they will have each zone you will have a procedure to go through in which you determine the weather for that zone, how likely you are to encounter enemies, and possibly you will have to resolve combat with different waves of enemies that are trying to stop you, and you continue like this until you reach your target, if you are that lucky and good. Then there will be a procedure to resolve the bombing on the target, and then you'll try to make it back home. Now back to the log that I showed you earlier. The line of the target that you're bombing doesn't just tell you, again, how many zones you have, but for each zone tells you two things. One is a modifier on the left side of the slash that tells you, that's a modifier that you apply when you determine whether or not you have to deal with enemies. So certain areas you're more likely or less likely to encounter enemies. The letters on the right side tell you pretty much the landscape over which you are flying, which in terms of gameplay really only matters if you have to bail out and then you want to know where in fact you are bailing out. But thematically, they really give you a sense of the trip. They really give you a sense that this is not just 13 times the same thing, it is flying over different things. I means Italy, so now we're flying over Italy, you're leaving the Foggia airport. W, now we're flying over water, we're going to France, right? Now we are flying over water and sea, Corsica, the Corsican island. Then we have more water, and then we are in France, and then we make our way back. And so, as you can see, if you look, different targets will have, again, different types of landscape, different types of countries that you're flying over. It's a small detail, but to me this gives a lot of interesting thematic detail. Now it is time to fly. We're still setting up our mission, and you will also need a log mission sheet. There are again different types depending on the model that you're flying. You will need to make copies of this basic sheet that you find here, and you will write information that relates to the mission. Very important here, you will keep track of the ammo that you're spending from different weapons on your aircraft. Also here you keep track of what's happening to the people in your crew, and the general idea is like no news is good news. Usually when you need to write something about them is because bad stuff happened to them. So for each zone, the first thing to do is to, well, determine the weather, and there is a table for that. Then as we proceed, we're also going to check if we have malfunctions, and we roll on a table. You will learn soon that the B17 has 3% chance of getting a malfunction each turn, the B24 5%. You roll 2d10s, 1 is the tens, 1 is the units, and you see then you have to roll on another table in case a malfunction occurred to see what that actually was. You determine to see if in that zone your aircraft is leaving contrails, which will make it easier for people to find you later. Then we need to see if you are likely to encounter an enemy. Now, you will, depending on the campaign that you're playing, there are 6 possible campaigns, you will roll a d10 and you cross-reference that, also taking into account the modifiers, to see what kind of resistance you're going to fight, to encounter. Suppose that after we take modifiers, we're going to have a moderate resistance here. Then we are on this table to see how many enemy waves we have, and as you can see, one table brings a modifier to the other table, 4. Suppose again we encounter moderate resistance, so that's a 5, and there are other modifiers, then we're going to encounter a wave. Each wave pretty much you will determine who is attacking you, where they're coming from, you will fire against them, then if they're still there, they will fire against you, and then you may have to repeat that if they're still following you. There's one saving grace, which is actually after you place them on the mat, there's a chance that your escorts will be able to drive some of them away before you actually have to fire, and they will fire at you. Several tables here, depending on the campaign that you're playing, to determine the waves. Suppose again we're playing campaign 3, 4, or 5, and we say we're encountering moderate resistance. We're encountering moderate resistance, one wave in moderate resistance. We roll 2d6s, but we don't add the result. We read them as 2-digit numbers, say 32 or 36. And then 36 I don't like. Is better if we roll 63. 63, there we go. We cross-reference. I was looking for something that wasn't like no combat or random event because I want to show you the real thing. 63, you cross-reference the level of resistance with the result, and that tells you the type of number and type of enemies that are attacking you and where they're coming from. For example, with 63, we get these 2 enemies here that are attacking us from 12 high and from 130 high. So we go to the tactical display. Tactical display here. Oh no, we kind of fell off formation. Back in formation, dude. So we said we're being attacked by 12 high and by 130 high. Was that it? I assume it was. That's what I seem to remember. Oh, high. Now, ta-da, that's them. Now we roll on a table. You know, I know that's shocking, right? We haven't done that yet. We roll on a table to see if our escort is able to drive away some of those. We roll on this table, roll 2d6, cross-reference with the type of cover that we have for that leg of the trip that has been determined at the beginning of the game, and that the number, the first number is the number of interceptors that are removed from the first wave. The other number is from later waves if you're facing more than one wave. As usual, you may have to take modifiers into account, and you can then, if some of those are removed, then you choose to remove them. Not all positions can be removed from the mat. For example, if they're coming at you in vertical dive, that is super sneaky. The interceptors cannot remove them. And suppose that at the end, that is what we have. Now we're facing those 2. Now we look at this at a table that tells us, depending on the position that the enemy is attacking us from, the weapons that we can actually use. For example, if they're attacking me from 12 level, then I can use my top turret and or the nose gun, depending on the model that I'm flying. For example, with the B-17F, I could use none, or both of these guns. If I decide to fire with those, I tick a box on the log sheet for that gun, just to indicate that I spent an ammo in that area. That will give me a certain number of attacks. And suppose that actually later we are using defensive fire against the guy coming from 130 high, and these are the guns that we can use. Now we can fire with 3 guns. So we have a certain number of attacks that we choose to perform against them. We roll to determine the quality of the German pilot. That will simply give us a modifier. That's how good they are at dodging our bullets. Once you have that modifier, and you may have to take the modifiers into account. Don't be scared by this list. A lot of these are situational. If bad stuff happened to you, then you have those things. So if your crew is healthy and your airplane is fine, most of these modifiers will not apply. So for each attack, roll on this table, apply modifiers, and if you miss, if you jammed your guns, or if you hit. If you hit them, then you roll on a table to determine the kind of thing that happens. And there are then tokens that you can add to the board, you can add to your targets to indicate the status as an effect of your attacks, for example. Knowing that the fighter may continue to attack but breaks off after the attack, the fighter continues to attack but has a penalty when attacking you, or the fighter is damaged and breaks off after the attack, has a penalty, or the fighter is destroyed. You should be so lucky to get the result very often. For each fighter that's still there after you fired at them, now it's their time to fire. You roll, you guessed it, on a table, and simply you cross-reference, actually doing cross-reference, you look at the line corresponding to the position they're attacking you from, and you know the range that counts as a hit, miss or as a hit when they're attacking you. If they hit you for each hit, yes, you roll on more tables. This is pretty much the general idea. For the, if you get on target, there's a special procedure which is not all that different. First, you resolve air combat as usual if you have to deal with that. Then you will need to roll on a table to resolve anti-aircraft damage against you, as the opponent, as of course the defenders are showering you with flak. Possibly, depends on various factors, on the visibility of the target, roll on a table, see how much flak you have to take. That will tell you the column that you will need to use on this table. Well, you will roll for 3 times, pretty scary. You'll know if you have been hit or miss. For each hit, you roll here to determine the number of actual hits that will reach you. And then you will, for each actual hit that reaches you, you will roll on more tables to determine the effect. Finally, you will roll on tables to determine how much of the target you've been able to take out. Then you'll try to get the heck out of there and fly back home. At the end, you will have a debriefing. You will have to take into account what happened. Depending on the condition of your aircraft, you may land and be able to cheer and celebrate, or you may have to do a crash landing. A lot of different stuff may happen. But this is what the game is about, really. It's about taking into account a large number of possibilities through an intricate system of tables. Continue like this, mission after mission, until, depending on the result, you will evaluate your level of success or defeat, depending on how well you did and what happened during your missions. Like B-17, but more. More of the same is not a problem at all when the same is pure awesomeness, and Target for Today gives you that. You get the same fun, the same pleasure, the same narrative, the same immersion that you have in B-17, with a larger range of things that may happen, of disasters that can occur, of places over which you're flying, of different ways in which you can deal with enemies that are coming from all directions, etc, etc, etc. It is a little more complex precisely because it has more meat. I mean, B-17 also had the advantage of really being friendly even for a newer gamer. Yes, it's procedural, but you read the rulebook and you go one step after the other, even if you have never played war game, you can play B17 and have a blast. Target for today, it's the same idea, mind you, but now there are more steps, more things that may happen, more tables to consult. And so before you see the forest for the trees, before all the different moving gears click into a coherent image in your mind and you can play fluidly and smoothly, it just takes a little longer, especially if you are a new wargamer. I'm not saying this to discourage possible newcomers to wargaming. I'm just saying that if you decide to start from Target, then you're gonna have to do a lot of extra work. Otherwise, play B17 first, and then that will ease you into Target for today. It is just a lot of fun. Like in B17, it is about the story, it is about the characters, it is about seeing what happens to these people. It's not so much about the tactical decisions, because the main decisions that you have is how many guns you're gonna fire against whom. Chances are that you're gonna fire a lot. You're gonna run out of ammo on a single placement, and then you're gonna have people running around and moving ammo around because, well, why not? Yeah, you may want to save some for later, but you don't have a present danger now. Maybe later you won't, so you go now. So even that decision, how much ammo, etc., is a fairly trivial one. All of these things should be flaws, should be negatives, and yet magically in B17 and in Target for today, they work differently. The linearity of the experience, the limited range of options is made up for by this incredibly thematic detail. All the homework that went into designing these tables and showing you how many things can happen and how one thing can alter the other. In that sense, now I have mechanics that are very linear and decision light, but precisely because of that, they don't act as an obstacle. I don't have to think about the mechanics, which are roll, 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 and I'm concentrating on what happens, on seeing my people dealing with the target, trying to coming out of the clouds to bomb the target, having to deal with flak, which again is not something that you really can do much. You're not gonna do magic dodgings with your B17. You're just flying straight and level to reach the target, and you're hoping that you make it there. And that's actually in B17 and in other games that have a simulationist approach, say Rangers for example has the same idea. The pace of the game is very discontinuous, which again, it would be a problem in a Euro game where you want to see a nice progression, but it really works when it's about the theme, when you want to have an experience of how things worked historically. Because you may have a part, the leg of your trip, which is just a breeze, nothing happens. The Germans seem to be pretty lazy today, and the few that make it there, they're actually then scared away by the escorts. Good job, little fellows flying with us, and maybe one makes it through and then you destroy it. And then after that, all of a sudden, suddenly, no warning, all hell breaks loose. Just the moment that your escort is leaving to go wherever it is that they're going, and before you make contact with another one, a storm of German enemies come in and things are exploding. You'll have some of your pilots are they start getting wounded, they die, all horrible things happen. And that is maybe when also you have a mechanical malfunction that maybe doesn't even have anything to do with part of the airplane being hit by the enemy. It's just that part that decides to fail at that point. So again, in a certain sense, it can be anticlimactic, it can be a weird narrative, it can be one in which you're there for the ride. But again, if you have the perspective of somebody in this big giant flying fortress that doesn't have much mobility, has a clear mission to do, go back there and forth, it really works. It really captures the spirit of the thing. This is for people that love history. This is for people that love immersive games and games with a narrative. And I know that most of what I said in this video, you could have applied it to B17. It's the same thing that I would say if I were reviewing B17, because the two games are so similar. But Target for today is the reinforced version, is the bigger version with just more stuff in it, even by simply comparing the box. You can see that with more theme, with more variety, with more replay value, also with more complexity, that may narrow the target for the game a little bit. But in general, a really good game, an experience. Actually, it's a game that really, it's about the experience of getting in contact with the theme. If you think you like this kind of game, if you think you can trade off some amount of decision for a really strong immersion with the theme, then B17 and now also Target for Today definitely are games for you.